Hello. Thank you for your interest in Sidewalks in Willow Springs. My name is Jeff Jablonski. This presentation is the same one I gave on June 23rd at the town hall meeting held at the Country Club of Roswell. There was probably about 10% of the neighborhood homeowners in attendance that evening. We know many of you care deeply about this, but have other commitments, so we figured the best way to expand our reach would be through this video series. So let me begin by telling you who I'm not. I'm not a public speaker. I'm definitely not a PowerPoint pro, so I apologize for the poor quality of this video in advance. 10 years ago, I saw my life as working, having a family, moving somewhere warm to die. Then we found Willow Springs and Country Club of Roswell. I love it here, and now I question my life's plan for leaving someday. I'm fortunate that my occupation affords me some free time, and I could use that time annoying my wife or trying to improve my golf game or playing with my kids, but I made a conscious decision to be part of this great community and help to shape the future for my growing family. With that, 2 years ago I ran for the HOA board. I was elected, and my life hasn't been the same since. It was also almost the shortest term ever. After seeing the passion at 2 years ago at the HOA meeting, I almost quit on the spot. But I persevered. But as the new guy, I was assigned the role of risk management. So essentially now I would be in charge of irritating half the neighborhood with the latest traffic calming flavor of the week. So with no desire to irritate or annoy my potential lifelong neighbors, I vowed to only act with the consensus of the neighborhood. Even though I was not initially excited about my HOA board assignment, I still believe if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. I've learned that statistically, the risk of using our streets is more than the risk posed of violent crime or an errant golf ball or wild coyote. And my views on improving walkability caught the attention of some in Roswell City Hall, and I was appointed to the Roswell Planning Commission earlier this year. So in this video series, I would like to discuss what we want, why, and how we came to these conclusions. The challenges to implement our conclusion, which is sidewalks, are money, land, and politics. And the last thing we'd like to discuss is an innovative plan on how we can overcome these challenges and accomplish something that has never been done before in our city. At the annual HOA meeting this past winter, I presented the reasons why we are pursuing sidewalks. So the first half of this may look familiar to some of you, but the second half will show our progress since this meeting and our plan going forward. So, do we want sidewalks? Well, from survey data, we're fairly confident that most of us do. Now the question is, how bad? So, not wanting this to be Jeff's ideas, I started a traffic calming committee. Sidewalks were not even discussed as an option at this point, and the volunteers, including many long-time and a few short-time residents. Some never walk, but are scared of hitting someone while driving. Many have raised children here. Some are grandparents who have children, and even grandchildren in the neighborhood. Steve Soldavini was raised in this neighborhood and is now raising a family of his own in Willow Springs. So I'd like to thank Chris Burns, Jim Schlotzhauer, Kevin Murphy, Ron Cagle, Rory Robichaud, Stan Dalby, Sean Fiker, and all of the Willow Springs HOA board for their support on this project so far. I'd also like to thank former City Councilman David Tullison and Karen Handel for their guidance and advice. This has truly been a team effort so far. So as a committee, we have many perceptions as to what the problem is, and lots of opinions as to what the solution should be. At our first meeting, we decided there would be no hidden agendas or even discussion of possible solutions. The first step was to identify the problem and define success using fact-based research. So what is the problem? Well, from a 2012 HOA survey, it had about a 70% response rate. Street safety was the number one HOA issue you've asked the HOA to work on, We found that 80% of us walk, bike, or jog in the neighborhood, and 20% of us are under the age of 18. So if each home has an average of 3 people in it, that's 440 kids that live in Willow Springs. So in short, many of our residents don't feel safe using our streets, driving or walking. This is the problem, and any solutions must be able to fix that problem. As you can see here, speeding is not the only issue. It's just part of it. Here someone almost hit someone while going 25 miles an hour. These are excerpts from a recent incident. So people are terrified using our streets. It's not going to get any better. There's no reason it should. The speed humps on Ascot Lane are shorter and less effective since Ascot was repaved. Studies show drivers just speed faster to make up for lost time when in a rush. The in-street signs slow cars down in the close proximity and protect the golfers, but are likely risk neutral as cars are seen driving on the wrong side of the road to avoid waiting for pedestrians to pass, or even not waiting. They've all been hit, they look worn, and pedestrians complain of feeling squeezed around these signs. So it appears that drivers have become complacent to the speed feedback signs according to the most recent speed study. And we try to shame speeders and even walkers on the web forum, and we hope that no one gets hurt. So if an accident were to happen in Willow Springs today, most of us would simply say, it was just a matter of time. Well, what would it take for us to say, how could this have happened? Here, my neighbor's mailbox was recently hit, so this happens multiple times every year around the neighborhood. If someone can hit a brightly colored rose bush and almost a fire hydrant, is it unreasonable to think that a person cannot be hit as well? Here are the results from our most recent speed study, completed in May of 2014. Just some things to note: speeds uphill versus downhill sometimes are within 1 mile per hour, so perhaps hills are not our only issue. Volume is up 20% since the previous speed study, which was completed in 2011. So where will we be in 3 more years? One location from the 2011 speed survey had over 40 drivers each day going at speeds of greater than 55 miles per hour. That's 40 drivers that's going 5 miles per hour higher than twice the speed limit. So clearly vehicles need to slow down. But how? So the first step is we went to the Roswell DOT and said our neighborhood has some street safety concerns and we would like their help to address them. Well, we're told every neighborhood has problems. This is a problem all around the world. So the city developed a traffic calming manual, and it details how traffic calming devices can be procured. So traffic calming, it consists of physical designs to slow cars down. In short, speeding vehicles must first be confirmed through a speed study. This is the requirement from Roswell, and we qualify. 65% of residents must approve of these permanent devices, and the cost is split 50-50 between the HOA and the city. So the size of our neighborhood and the number of devices required, this could be tens of thousands of dollars. According to the Roswell DOT director, it's very difficult to enact for a reason. It punishes those that don't speed. And nobody has ever completed this in Roswell, by the way. So if traffic calming guaranteed slower traffic, this may be worth pursuing. However, we learned that studies have shown that drivers tend to speed faster in between devices. So we could anticipate a 10% drop in average speeds, or roughly 3 miles per hour. Would it be worth it? What if we could get a 65% vote, come up with the money, but people still don't feel safe? Well, we feel that even with traffic calming devices, residents would still have safety concerns because the devices could further exacerbate the problem and put pedestrians in even more danger. Traffic calming really only addresses vehicle speeds. So for example, would you walk around this curve against traffic? How about at night? Well, why not? There's a traffic calming device right before and after this curve. There's a speed hump right after this and right before. But does the speed of the oncoming vehicle really matter when you're walking feet away from an SUV while pushing a baby, or walking with your spouse or your dog or an elderly person? Going through this area and walking against traffic is scary with cars going at any speed. There's a sidewalk that ends at this traffic signal. Would you walk against traffic here? It's a pretty scary spot. Vehicle speeds add to just one of the risks of using our streets. Even with traffic calming devices, we would still have limited sight distance around hills and curves, texting drivers, impaired drivers, reckless driving, a high volume of vehicles, inexperienced drivers, and even very experienced drivers. We surveyed the neighborhood last year. We had about 161 people reply, and it appears unlikely that we would come close to the required 65% approval to install a permanent traffic calming device. We've been told the police will not give tickets for going 34 miles per hour in the neighborhood. So we thought adding enforced as posted would give them better ability to ticket. This idea was actually hated the most, so it tells us that we want to still have the ability to speed when we see fit. And speed feedback sign, although popular, has the most chance of passing, but not by much, and I'll talk about those later, how effective they've become. This is a template we used last year. We've heard we got to fix the cut-through traffic. That's if once we fix that, we'll fix our problem. We've been told that 50% of the people of cars coming in our neighborhood are cutting through. Well, how do you know that? So what we did is we stationed people, 3 people at each exit or entrance, and we logged every car in with the timestamp and versus every car out. So if a car came in at 7:02 a.m. and it left at 7:03 a.m., 1, we knew you were speeding. 2, we knew you were cutting through the neighborhood. So with that, we found about probably just less than 10% of the morning rush hour was in fact cutting through the neighborhood. So we could stop that. We'd have to, of course, gate the neighborhood, which would mean we'd have to privatize our roads. And the HOA would be responsible for maintaining our streets, resurfacing, street sweeping, etc. It's a tremendous capital expense entrusted to our volunteer board. Access would still need to be granted to the multitude of lawn care providers that serve our neighborhood, country club members, country club guests, our guests, FedEx, UPS, pest control services, tree service providers, maids, babysitters, home repairmen. And we just asked, should we gate the community? And most of us feel it would not fix the problem if our residents don't feel safe using our streets. And survey results show you agree. This is from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, just something to keep in mind as we go ahead. This is a chart we use at work to evaluate risk. I feel it works in our situation as well. Everything we do involves risk. Risk can be quantified based on severity and the likelihood of an accident. This is how we determine which risks are worth taking and which ones require risk mitigation. We do this all the time without knowing it, but we still use our cars and use hair dryers and swim in the ocean. We've determined that the risk of using these is acceptable and reasonable. We mitigate by wearing seatbelts, not standing in water when using a hair dryer, not swimming where someone is chumming the ocean for fish. And so what are the consequences of an accident in Willow Springs? What would happen when we're struck by a car? Obviously, it would be pretty serious, likely in serious injury or even death. You can say, well, how likely is that to happen? Is it possible? Perhaps, maybe even likely? If something can kill you, and it might happen, it deserves some major attention. So clearly something needs to be done. Our goal is to manage or reduce risk to an acceptable level. We can focus on reducing the consequences of an accident, which is very hard to do when we are talking about people and heavy metal objects running into each other, or we can reduce the likelihood of an accident using reasonable means. It's not reasonable to expect people to never go for a walk or walk home from a neighbor's house after dinner in the dark. It's not reasonable to remove the hills and curves in our streets that cause limited sight distance, and we can't expect every driver to never be distracted or in a rush or impaired. We can't fix a lack of morals and values. So what else is left? Well, how's about sidewalks? These are some quotes from the same survey done last year, and we feel this is the only reasonable mitigation that would significantly reduce the likelihood of an accident to an acceptable level. Sidewalks also has many other benefits, which I will discuss. Here are some more comments in support of sidewalks from the survey. And of course, not everyone thinks this is a good idea. But we can't please everyone, nor should we try, but we have to please the majority, and that is our goal. So we asked the neighborhood how to proceed: sidewalks or traffic calming. We've asked, do you want sidewalks? And it appears a majority of us agree, close to 70%. It also appears that likely 70% of us would support hosting or accommodating a sidewalk on our lot or on their lot. And it appears most of us feel walkability will increase our property values. Though in case you're still not sold, maybe the aesthetics will convince you. Here's a young girl walking in the gutter in Willow Springs. And here's pictures from a neighborhood in Roswell, down the street from us. Now, this neighborhood was built with sidewalks in the 90s. It's only on one side of the street. It's only on their main thoroughfare. Please don't look at the houses. This is a much different, newer neighborhood, but just look at the streetscape. Note mailboxes and utility boxes. They're the same distance to the curb as in our neighborhood. Here we have a walker in the grass. Google actually caught a few walkers exercising in our neighborhoods. They were all female, so gentlemen, I think we need to get out and walk a little more too. Note the utility boxes on the left. And note the utility boxes on the left here with the sidewalk right in front of it. Here is the blind curve I showed you earlier on Ascot Lane. And here's a similar blind curve in Nesbitt Lakes. Note the mailboxes are in the same place as ours. Excuse me, and the sidewalk is immediately behind it. I think you could say our street landscaping is well established. And we can note the landscaping around the mailbox here. I think that looks great. And there's no reason that a sidewalk can't simply go right behind that. Here's a picture of the lone Willow Springs willow tree. Note the Drive 25, Keep Our Kids Alive sign. And it may not be doing a whole lot of good. And note how fast the Google driver with a camera on top of his car is going. So he's caught in the act, 37 miles an hour. Not unusual for this spot. So if the safety and the aesthetics don't convince you, research also indicates that sidewalks are linked to a more social connections, a stronger sense of community, reduced crime, a likely higher property values, and increased walkability. I'll not pander to you and tell you your values will go up, although it appears very likely. This study looked at 90,000 real estate transactions, shows there's a cost to having a less walkable neighborhood. Many studies show that well-maintained sidewalks have either no effect or positive effect on property values. Good news, in Roswell, the city would be responsible for sidewalk maintenance, not the homeowners. And not every city does that. This is from a recent AJC article citing today's buyers are demanding more walkable neighborhoods. The city of Roswell now requires sidewalks in all new neighborhoods on both sides of the streets, on all the streets. Therefore, we may want to consider retrofit sidewalks as a safety mechanism and a means of freshening. So, lastly, if the fact that it'll keep us safer, it looks better, and will likely increase property value, how about simply just compassion? We've heard many say it's just a matter of time before someone gets killed. We've seen reckless behavior so many times without any adverse consequences. This may have led some of us to neglect the issue with the assumption that an accident will never occur. Well, one approach to safety is to wait until an accident happens and then address it. A far better approach to safety concerns is to identify the risk, which we clearly have, and address them before an accident happens. This sidewalk is in Fairfax County, Virginia. It was built after a young girl was struck and killed by a car. Sidewalks should not be monuments to dead people. We looked at everything with an unbiased eye, and we strongly feel it is this. We've identified the problem. We don't feel safe on our streets. We've identified the solution, sidewalks. Survey results show likely overwhelming consensus. Our efforts since the annual HOA meeting has concentrated on understanding how this can be done. We've promised to communicate via an HOA special meeting, which we just hosted, to review the options for installation of sidewalks and to gain input and support from the community on those plans. This is what we're doing now. So in the next video, we'll discuss what we learned through our discussions with the city.